Hi everybody, and welcome to our module on bacterial culture. Let's start off by talking about growth plates, and this is an example of a growth plate down here. It's usually a circular dish with a gel substance inside it, and you can streak bacteria across the top and make colonies of bacteria grow, and that's what these orange lines are on the plate. Those are bacteria that are growing on the plate. So a growth plate generally contains agar, and agar is a semi-solid substance that comes from seaweed. And the reason we grow bacteria on agar is because they don't consume it or decompose it, so it will be there indefinitely for them to grow on top of. And then we put the agar inside a petri dish, which is this circular dish right here. And you've probably used these in a micro lab, either in med school or high school or college. Then we can add to the agar nutrients that support growth. So we add things like sugar and water and salts and amino acids. And there are lots and lots of commercially available growth plates for you to grow bacteria on. So when we grow bacteria on specific types of agar and specific types of growth plates, we call that a culture media. And what we do is we modify the substances in the agar to select or to help certain types of bacteria grow. So some culture media and some growth plates are called non-selective, and these are general purpose. They grow basically all bacteria. And an example is nutrient agar. So nutrient agar just has lots of nutrients that lots of different bacteria will grow on. Also, blood agar is a type of non-selective culture media. It's in fact the most commonly used non-selective media, and lots of different types of bacteria grow on blood agar. It doesn't select for one type over another. Now contrast non-selective media to selective media. These contain substances that are toxic so that only certain bugs will grow. And a good example of this is Thayer-Martin media, which only grows Neisseria. So Neisseria is commonly found in throat swabs, which contain lots and lots of different bacteria. But if you plate the throat swab on this type of media, only the Neisseria will grow. There are some other words we use to describe culture media. Sometimes we say that culture media are enriched, and this means that we added special nutrients so certain bugs will grow in a certain pattern. For example, blood agar is enriched by the addition of sheep's blood, and chocolate agar is also enriched with the presence of certain nutrients. And then sometimes we call culture media differential, and when we say it's differential, we mean that different bugs grow with different patterns that we can see. So the best example of this is blood agar. So some bacteria demonstrate a pattern of alpha hemolysis, and others demonstrate a pattern of beta hemolysis. I'll show you some examples of that in a few slides, but the point here is that blood agar is a differential medium because it allows us to identify different bacteria based on their growth pattern on the culture media. And you should know that some media can be described with more than one term. So for example, blood agar is enriched because blood is added to the culture medium, and it's also differential because bacteria show differential hemolytic patterns to help us identify them. Another example is eosin methylene blue. This is a selective media because only gram-negatives will grow. It's also differential because bacteria that ferment lactose show a different pattern than bacteria that cannot ferment lactose. Another term you should know about is the word fastidious. So some bacteria are called fastidious. Now, if you look fastidious up in the dictionary, it means attentive to detail. But when we're talking about fastidious organisms, we mean that they require special nutrients in order to grow. So many fastidious bacteria will not grow on standard media. You have to use a special media that has their growth requirements present in the agar. And some examples of this are H. influenza and Legionella. These are both fastidious bacteria, and we'll talk in a little bit about the specific culture media you have to use if you want these bugs to grow. So for the remainder of this module, I'm going to go through different types of agar and culture media and talk about what's in them and which bacteria like to grow on them. And we'll start with the most important one, which is blood agar. So blood agar contains mammalian blood. Usually it's 5% sheep's blood. It is a non-selective media, so lots and lots of bacteria will grow. It doesn't select only for gram-positives or gram-negatives. It's enriched because it contains blood, and it is also differential because different bacteria display different hemolysis patterns. So let's look at this picture down here on the right. In the middle of the petri dish, we see the letter B, and B is some organisms that are beta hemolytic. So they've been put on this blood agar, and they are creating a zone of whiteness around them. And the reason that zone is white is because these bacteria are completely hemolyzing all the blood cells that are around them. And this is what beta hemolysis looks like. Now, on the right-hand side of the dish, we see the symbol gamma, and these bacteria are growing, and they're not changing the color of the agar around them at all. These bacteria are not hemolyzing the red blood cells at all, and they're called gamma hemolytic. And then alpha hemolytic is over here on the left side of the dish, and that's somewhere in between the two. These bacteria are partially hemolyzing the blood cells, and that's why you get this alpha pattern. So I've summarized this right here. Beta hemolytic bacteria completely lyse the red cells. Gamma hemolytic bacteria have no lysis of red cells, and alpha do partial lysis. They're somewhere in between the other two. So the reason blood agar is so useful for identifying bacteria is because it distinguishes lots of different kinds of Streptococcus. So this is a slide that you'll become very familiar with. It's the way we identify gram-positive bacteria. So once you know a bacteria is gram-positive, you then try to decide what its shape is. And most gram-positive bugs are circles. They are gram-positive cocci. The cocci are split up between staph and strep based on whether they're catalase positive and whether they occur in clusters or chains. So Streptococcus are cocci that are catalase negative and they occur in chains. And the way we differentiate different types of strep bacteria is to grow them on blood agar. So if they display a beta hemolytic pattern, it's either strep pyogenes or strep agalactae. If they have an alpha pattern, it's strep pneumonia or strep viridans. And if they have a gamma pattern, it's one of these down at the bottom. Usually it's Enterococcus, but rarely it's a bacteria called strep bovis. So we'll talk more about how to identify bacteria in another module, but what I want you to know for here is that blood agar is extremely important for separating one bug from another. So let me reiterate this because it's a very important point. Blood agar is commonly used to differentiate species of strep based on whether they're alpha, beta, or gamma hemolytic, and make sure you remember this. Now, two other special caveats about blood agar. If you grow Pseudomonas, which is a gram-negative rod, it is beta hemolytic as well. We usually don't talk about beta hemolysis for gram-negative bugs, but Pseudomonas is beta hemolytic, and it does one unique thing. It forms these greenish metallic appearing colonies on blood agar, and that's because it produces a couple of pigments called pyoviridin and pyocyanin. Pyocyanin is what makes it blue, and it's the presence of these pigments that the bacteria produces as it grows that makes them look greenish metallic when you grow them on blood agar. One other caveat about blood agar is that Staph aureus is beta hemolytic. So normally we don't identify staph by their hemolysis pattern, but if you do plate staph on blood agar, you will find that it's beta hemolytic, and you should definitely know that because sometimes this is mentioned in a board question and you will think because it's beta hemolysis it must be a strep, but you need to know that Staph aureus can also do beta hemolysis on blood agar. Next, let's talk about chocolate agar. So chocolate agar is the agar used for H. influenzae, and you should always remember that. It's a variant of blood agar. It contains red blood cells, but they've been lysed by heating. And when you lyse red blood cells, they spill two important factors that H. flu needs to grow. The first one is NAD, which is also called factor 5, and the second one is hemin, which is also called factor 10. And the NAD comes from inside red blood cells, so when you heat the media, you lyse the red blood cells, but you don't heat it so much that you destroy the NAD, and thus these two factors will be present, and that allows the H. flu to grow. Remember, it's considered a fastidious organism because it needs these two unique nutrients in order to grow. And one classic scenario that you should know about is sometimes H. flu will grow on blood agar if Staph aureus is present. So remember, Staph aureus is beta hemolytic, so if you have a petri dish and you plate some Staph aureus like this, it will hemolyze the blood around it, and then H. flu will be able to grow in the area surrounding the Staph aureus where the red blood cells have been lysed and where factors 5 and 10 are present. Next, let's talk about Thayer-Martin media, and the thing to know about this media is that it is selective for Neisseria, and the way I've always remembered this is that M is very close to the letter N, so therefore you can remember that N is for Neisseria. So you should know that Neisseria often comes from sites with lots of other flora, for example the throat or the genitalia. So you need a selective media that will grow only the Neisseria and not all the other bugs, and that's what Thayer-Martin media does. It's a supplemented form of chocolate agar. What's added to it is vancomycin to kill most gram-positives, another medicine called colistin or polymyxin which kills most gram-negatives except Neisseria, and then finally nystatin is added to kill most fungi. And sometimes this bacterial media is called VPN or VCN, and that stands for vancomycin. The C is for colistin or polymyxin, whichever one you want to call it, and the N is for nystatin. And here's an example of how it works. So on the left we've got chocolate agar, and you can see that lots of different bacteria are growing. On the right there's the Thayer-Martin medium, so the chocolate agar has been supplemented with vancomycin and polymyxin and nystatin. And now you just have some small dots, and those are little colonies of Neisseria that are growing because that's the only bug that will grow on the Thayer-Martin medium. The next type of media is called Bordajengo agar. It's also called potato agar, and it's got the letters B-O-R-D in it. And you can remember that that goes with Bordetella pertussis, and that's what this media is used for. It's to culture Bordetella, which is the cause of whooping cough, which, as you may know, is extremely rare in the modern era because of vaccination. This agar is prepared from potatoes, and it's very high in starch, and this is favorable for the pertussis bacteria. Next, let's talk about Loeffler's media or tellurite plates. You should think of these together because they are both used to identify Corynebacterium diphtheriae, which is also very rare in the modern era. So Loeffler's media is a selective media for diphtheria, and tellurite media is a plate supplemented with cysteine and tellurite, and it's differential for diphtheria because diphtheria reduces the potassium tellurite to a substance called tellurium, and this makes gray-black colored colonies on the plate, and that's how you know you have a diphtheria colony present. Lowenstein-Jensen agar is a special media for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And one thing to always remember about Mycobacterium in general, and especially tuberculosis, is that all these bacteria are very slow growing, so it takes several weeks to grow them on any type of agar. So Lowenstein-Jensen agar has eggs, flour, glycerol, and salt added, and this turns out to be a favorable mixture for growth of tuberculosis. It still takes several weeks for visible colonies to appear, and when you have someone with suspected TB, you need to treat them before the culture is back. And always remember that tuberculosis is stained with the Zeal-Nielsen stain. That's what makes it an acid-fast bacteria, and you can often identify them by staining without needing to grow them in the lab. Eaton's agar is a special agar for culturing Mycoplasma pneumonia, and this can cause interstitial pneumonia. And recall that Mycoplasma is unique because it has no cell wall, so it's poorly visualized with the Gram stain. Eaton medium is specialized for Mycoplasma growth because it has lots of cholesterol present, and these bacteria need cholesterol to grow. Even on Eaton's agar, it still takes days to weeks to grow Mycoplasma, and culture is rarely used in the modern era. We have other ways to diagnose Mycoplasma pneumonia. First of all, usually we just treat patients empirically, so based on their symptoms and their x-ray, we think they might have a Mycoplasma pneumonia infection, so we give them appropriate antibiotics. If you specifically want to identify the bacteria, we often use antibody testings, that's called serology, or we use PCR to find bacterial DNA, or sometimes we test for cold agglutinins, which are antibodies that are often present in Mycoplasma infections. McConkey's agar is a very important and useful growth medium for identifying gram-negative bugs. It's a selective media for gram-negative bacteria, and that's because it contains bile salts, and these inhibit the growth of gram-positive bugs. It's also differential for lactose fermenters, so lactose fermenting bacteria produce acid, which turns the agar pink. Non-lactose fermenters are colorless. So here's an example of what that would look like. On the left side of the screen are lactose fermenting bacteria, and you can see that the agar has been turned pink. On the right side, there are colorless colonies growing, so these are non-lactose fermenting bacteria. So McConkey's agar is used frequently for identifying gram-negative rods. This is our algorithm for identification of gram-negative bacteria. And once we see that we have gram-negative rods, the next thing we want to know is whether they are lactose fermenters or lactose non-fermenters, and Mercanke's agar is what helps us figure that out. Eosin methylene blue agar is very similar in its function to McConkey's agar. It contains eosin and methylene blue, that's where it gets its name, and these are inhibitors to gram-positive bacteria, the same way the bile salts inhibit gram-positive bugs in McConkey's agar. Just like McConkey's agar, eosin methylene blue is also differential for lactose fermenters. So lactose fermenters like E. coli will appear as these colonies with a green metallic sheen, or they may look sort of black or bluish brown. Bacteria that can't ferment lactose look colorless or are transparent. And here's an example of some E. coli growing on eosin methylene blue agar, and you can see that it's got that green metallic sheen to it right here. Sorbitol McConkey agar is used to identify the O157 strain of E. coli, and you can just remember the O in sorbitol stands for O157. This is the strain of E. coli that produces a Shiga-like toxin and that can cause hemolytic uremic syndrome. So O157 cannot ferment sorbitol, but other E. coli can. This means that O157 grows as colorless colonies on this medium, while other E. coli produce pink colonies. Buffered charcoal yeast is only used for one purpose, and that's to identify Legionella. And you can see that there's only one L in the entire name. That's at the end of the word charcoal, and you can remember that that stands for Legionella. It has these dyes that give Legionella a very distinct color. It also has some antibiotics added so that competing bugs don't grow. And you should know that it's very important to culture Legionella because it can contaminate water supplies and cause outbreaks. So if a number of people, for example, at a nursing home have atypical pneumonias, you want to use this agar and see if you can grow and identify Legionella, because if you find it, you're then going to want to investigate whether or not there is an outbreak in the nursing home. Now, there is a urinary antigen test that we sometimes use to detect Legionella, but this is only useful in certain strains of Legionella infections, so-called type 1 infections. So if it's negative, it doesn't 100% mean that the patient does not have a Legionella infection, and that's why growing the bacteria on this buffered charcoal yeast is very important. The last culture media I'll mention is Sabouraud's agar, and this is a selective media for fungi, so it's not used for bacteria at all. It was developed by a French dermatologist, that's why it's got this French name, and he was trying to make the bugs grow that cause infection of skin, hair, and nails. These are called dermatophytes. It's got acid or antibiotics added that inhibit bacterial growth so that only fungi will grow. And you just need to remember that when you hear about something growing on Sabouraud's agar, they are trying to tell you that it's a fungal infection. And that concludes our module on culture.